What do JSON and conversational AI have in common? They're the invisible glue that makes it possible for you to order a coffee or book a flight or chat with an agent, and that agent sounds uncannily human. I've seen some stats where people are saying maybe 1 in every 3 attempts, they're getting the wrong response. What's going on, everyone? We are back with another one. If you haven't figured out already, today we are talking about conversational AI, but probably in a way that you're not necessarily familiar with or used to. But yesterday I jumped into like an impromptu call with a bunch of devs, and I just realized how much information was lacking from people that aren't necessarily in it on a day-to-day basis. And I said, this could be a perfect episode for us to kind of cover a lot of this. So I wanted to cover it in several concrete ways. Number one, we need to talk about the JSON aspect here. What are we talking about? Well, a lot of companies and a lot of developers, when they're creating, let's say, a chatbot, a generic chatbot, maybe a voice agent bot, whatever it may be, they have a prompt that they give to the LLMs. So basically, it'll tell them something like, you're a customer service agent, right? Or you're a repair specialist, some kind of mode for the LLM to realize that it's the persona of XYZ. And then it's giving them the message. So in an example that I can give you, let's say we have a chatbot that we've developed for, I don't know, a furniture company, right? They ship furniture to homes, let's call it Bashley Furniture, okay? And so this chatbot, a customer will come and say, hey, I ordered a couch, didn't come in. Normally, you provide that response, you are wrapping their message in the prompt. You are a customer service agent for a furniture store responding to customers' messages. The message is then added to that prompt and it's sent off to the LLM. The LLM will read the chat, will analyze it, and then will send back its reply. And the way that it sends it back is an NLG, which is natural language generation format, right? And so it's giving you a very long paragraph kind of response, and you will kind of use some very advanced regex or parse it in a certain way, and then you'll give that message back to the user. Or some people just put that message back in directly right away. Well, when you put that message back in right away, there's certain things that need to happen, right? So maybe you need to trigger that this message is sent to a certain department in the company. Well, you don't have any information to really go off of because you just have that paragraph that you fed back, right? Or maybe we need a confidence score to say, hey, we're this confident that the message is accurate to the customer's needs. That way you can determine, like, if it's under a certain level of score, you can reprompt in order to kind of get that another version of that message. Or you could even have something additional, like maybe you're having, not only is it the sentiment of, not only is it the department that you're sending it to, but it's the sentiment of the message. Is it highly negative? Is it neutral? Is it positive? Is this customer actually having a good experience? And then maybe we don't need to escalate it as high, and maybe we need to add priority to this. Well, the LLM can determine all that for you, right? But it won't naturally do that unless we're forcing it into a certain structure. But then, and this is the kicker, when you have all this come in a paragraph format, to get and figure out where all this information is a nightmare. So I've seen some very elaborate connected patterns where people are getting this information, but it's not a foolproof way. And in some testing that I did for a tutorial recently, I saw something very, very familiar. So 1 out of every 3 was giving me values that had absolutely nothing to do with what was going on. So now you're having to reprompt it again. So the way that you can kind of circumvent that a little bit is by forcing the LLM's response into a JSON format. And so now you're getting all these values that you need JSON wise. So, multiple fields. So if you're not familiar, think about, you have a regular paragraph of text. Now you could have it as open curly braces, sentiment, colon, what is the sentiment? Neutral, negative, positive. Then you have the departments, and you can actually use an array with the initial prompt to say, these are the departments that we have, which you could basically use. And one way to understand this, if you're familiar with TypeScript, is maybe types or enums, where you give it those specific values. Now, in your JSON response, you're saying, hey, it's going to the shipping and delivery. Hey, it's going to the customer service. Hey, it's going to escalation department. Now, it's giving you those fixed types of those departments. Then you have your confidence score that you can say, hey, if the reply you give me is less than a 90 on the confidence scale, I want you to rerun this again. So now you have it auditing itself instead of giving out a reply just for speed, but it being incorrect, right? And then you can have the content. Well, because it's in this JSON structure, you can now even use each property to be like, okay, it's going to this shipping department. Give me response.department. And now you can send them that message directly instead of it going through a routing where it's going to a customer service agent first, which is then sent out. So you're removing all these unnecessary human layers for something that's you're already automating anyway. And the thing that I love about this is you can get rid of so many unnecessary and often very negative and mean interactions, because we all know one of the biggest attrition rates for customer service is you having terrible days because customers are just yelling at you for the sake of yelling at you. For whatever reason, human beings, man, we forget that the agents on the other side are humans, and I've just seen so much.
I love the tweet that was Sam Altman put out. Is like, yeah, we're losing like tens of millions of dollars because of the please and thank yous, because people keep increasing the
I ain't gonna lie, I still write it.
I still write it too all the time.
When the robots take over, they're gonna spare me.
They're gonna remember me, you know. They're gonna remember me and how kindly I treated them, and you know, I give them a break every once in a while. I use JSON prompting so that they could do less work, you know. Like
there you go. There you go.
I think this is another segment of Danny pulls Leon kicking and screaming into the future. Because for the longest time, I was trying to get around not having to do any of this stuff. Even because I was using Markdown already. I had rode the wave of like the XML stuff. And so like for me, the JSON prompt, I thought was another hype cycle. I thought it was like another like wave thing. And I get it, right? We're trying to get towards more deterministic systems, right? We want more repeatability out of these LLMs. We want to be able to give it something and get the same thing back as much as possible. And when we're dealing with these LLMs, we're just getting wildly variable, wildly different data. The things don't come out as we expect it. And so it makes sense. Like if we can get it to adhere to some values, some sort of format, it's going to make our lives as developers easier. I didn't really see it having an effect until image and video models. With like normal text-based LLMs, I was kind of getting okay enough results with other techniques to where I was like, this must be another thing, like another MCP thing. And when it came time to start messing with image gen models and video models, they really need this. The cleaner you can get your input and expected output out, the better your results are going to be. And so I started with the JSON prompting because of that. And I started to be able to see actually consistent results coming out of those models because of it. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, if I can do that there, do I get better results out of other things? And the answer has been yes. When I've been playing around with a lot of like automations and kind of like putting like agents in the loop for things like for sort of some automations, the problem has always been that the data that I'm working on has been wildly inconsistent. And so forcing JSON rules throughout all these different things that are now being connected, like you were saying, means that even as I'm handing off to an LLM or having an agent in the loop, they're all playing with the same style of data, and forcing them to use that same style has made things move a lot more smoothly. We'll get back to the episode in a second, but now a word from our sponsor. Financial literacy is important, especially if you're in a position where you're changing income brackets or careers. More income can create larger financial issues if you don't budget correctly.
It's true.
So this episode is sponsored by Lucas Casares, certified financial planner and founder of Level Up Financial Planning, where he specializes in serving early and mid-career tech professionals to help you take your financial confidence to the next level.
Leon and I have helped thousands of people level up in tech, often going from 0 to 6-figure careers and seeing all kinds of mistakes. Level Up Financial Planning helps you gain clarity on all of your finances. This includes prioritizing, managing employer stock, retirement planning, tax planning and preparation, college planning, and as a special deal for our listeners, to get a complimentary meeting with Lucas Casares, all you have to do is visit levelupfinancialplanning.com to find out more. The link is in the show notes. And we'll get back to the episode.
I am now on the train, but it took me a while to get there.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I have learned a new level of prompting because of these image tools like Nano Banana. It's funny because you can, when you give it a very broad generalization, or you give it something like if you have no levels of criteria and you're just like, I just want to see if something happens, you're blown away. I've tremendously blown away. And then once you start trying to get it to fix things a little bit, it's a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. And I have learned that sometimes for these image models, for example, I have to make some really wild, out there, specific in a weird way asks to see something relevant. So one prime example, I was messing around and made an image of like me and somebody else together barbecuing in a backyard. And I was like this came out pretty decent, but it's not exactly where I want it to be. The face doesn't really look great. It's not as accurate as I want. It basically just made an Indian-ish Mexican kind of looking person and a black person hanging out in a backyard. And I'm like, it would be great if it actually looked like us when we provided the actual images to go off of. And I kept giving it prompts and it just would not do anything. And it wasn't until I was like, can you make the subject on the right 14.8% closer to the subject on the left? And then it started like making these adjustments. As weird as it was, but that hyper specificity got it to finally start making the changes that I was saying. And then after that, the subsequent prompts were very focused. But it wasn't until I came out with that weird specific did it finally start interacting. It was so strange to me. But it just kind of goes to show, like, these models, no matter how often you interact with it, if you're not providing it very over detailed context, it will drop it off. And maybe that's another thing we could talk about real fast. Context windows. I feel like this is one that a lot of people really, really mess up. Did you want to add anything before I moved on?
No, that's fair. No, I think I'm excited about that topic. Yeah.
Yeah. So context windows, when you're using tools like RuCode, Warp, Windsurf, Cursor, Copilot, whatever, right? There's a context window. It's the number of tokens that you can use in a request, right? And some of these context windows are 200,000 tokens. Some new ones are like 1 million tokens, right? Which is phenomenal. But people don't realize this. So after, let's say I'm using, what's an AI tool that you use a lot?
I use kind of Claude Code.
Claude Code. Okay. Claude Code, Cursor, those seem to be like some popular ones. Even Claude Code, I like way more than the other. There's nothing wrong with Cursor, but I feel like when it comes to these tools now, they're all using the same models. So it really, really, really comes down to the infrastructure around the prompt and how it manipulates it, and how, once it gets a response back from the LLM, how it manipulates it. It's a direct correlation to how well you feel about your experience and the quality of the results. And for some of these tools, the infrastructure is significantly higher, in my opinion, than compared to other tools. And your experience will be night and day difference based on that. And, Cursor's cool, but I feel like the infrastructure around it and the prompts isn't as great compared to others, but it does the job, don't get me wrong. But you'll see a context window when you're making these calls, right? And essentially, let's say your context window is 200,000 tokens. As you get closer and closer to that context window, your tool is like, okay, hey, we're about to hit this limit. If we hit the limit, it's going to be the max that we can hit, right? So we need to do something. And so what it ends up doing then is the earlier parts of your conversation, whatever it feels like isn't relevant, it completely drops. It'll keep the broad stroke, but none of the details. And it drops it so that way it can make sure you have tokens available to continue the conversations. And as you progress further and further and further into that conversation, more stuff is dropped off the back in order to keep opening that context. So you could be talking in that same thread of chat for, let's say, 1 million tokens. You 5 times the amount of context that was in there originally. It has condensed your conversation dramatically over and over and over again, at least 5 iterations, if not more. So that means earlier parts of that conversation are completely forgotten. But people will say, no, you're not doing this right. We already went through this. You fixed this thing. Why would you erase this now? Well, it's like that context was dropped off. And you went down this completely different path that has no context of what you're talking about. So you need to be mindful of that. If you're iterating over and over and over again, there's just no way for it to remember the beginning of that conversation or the changes that it made in relation to that without constantly being reminded of XYZ. So you need to get in that habit of, if we've gone into too many messages and too many iterations, reminding them of the original context to stay within the confines. But the other thing that people could be doing is adding in specific rules. There are cursor rules, there are warp rules, etc., root code rules. But one thing that I would say here in particular with the rules is your rules are reviewed every single time a call is made, whereas context can be dropped off and forgotten. And if you don't remind yourself to send it in there, it's not going to remember it. So I have rules for things like don't leave comments, right? Like, unless the comment is explaining something highly business related, which has become really valuable. That's a great rule to add up in there. So I'll write that rule. I add in some examples of what I deem to be irrelevant comments that it shouldn't leave. Like, this adds padding and the thing is padding, right? Like, so why were you ever going to leave that?
Yeah.
But there are other rules too, where it's like, this is the flow of the application. This is the architecture. You should remember this in regards to like how this application is working. So that way, anytime we're talking through this, you can kind of reference what the flow is for this thing. It's a phenomenal use case for that.
Yeah, I think this is kind of why I kind of go full circle talking about the JSON stuff. Why I was so deep in Markdown world for a while was basically to try and figure out this problem. And so for me, there's a lot of different things I was doing originally. One of my favorite sites is Git Ingest, which will give you a full Markdown file of any GitHub repo. And one of the things I really learned from that is that it gives you like a tree structure of the entire repo, which makes it easier for the LLM to like put stuff in and out of context, grab the things it needs. So I do that for all of my, like all my projects. I'll have like the rules like you're saying, but I'll always have some sort of PRD that I've turned into a task list. Inside of my cursor, I'll have my task list. Anytime I'm doing any type of like agentic stuff, it's always referencing that task list to make sure that it's staying in the right place. A lot of my files now individually will have snippets in them that try and tell the LLM like what context it needs. So I'm not even trusting the adding stuff in the context. Like, so a lot of my files explicitly say at the top, like what you need, what folder structure it ties to, where you need to look for things. That way, I mean, you have to put more stuff in there. And then the other big thing that I've been doing recently is a dev log. So every single time it makes any changes or I make any changes, it gets added to this like dev log file. And that's always in context so that it doesn't repeat itself. And that saved me so much time because it's referencing this file that gets added to context that will let it know what it's already tried. And that stops a lot of the spinning out. So it's funny to see engineering evolve to us like trying to wrangle all of these things together, and everyone has these little hacks that are keeping the context windows down. Because if you don't, especially the way that we're going now, where I'll have 4 or 5 MCP servers, they're all adding to context, right? Like there's all these little things that are just like bloating the context windows, and it's part of the job now to figure out how to wrangle all that, or else you start to have the drop off like you're mentioning.
Done. And one thing that I forgot, we should probably explain some of the stuff. Now that I think about it, like I remember we got an email one time from a beginner where they're like, you're saying acronyms and things that I don't necessarily know the meaning of. And it just popped in my head as we were talking. I'm like, man, this might be one of those episodes where we need to over explain some stuff just in case. And so let's explain a couple concepts that my mind is going to, that we kind of discussed. One is JSON. So if you're brand new to JavaScript, you should learn this pretty early on, to be honest with you. But JSON is a format where maybe, for example, if you're making an API request or something along those lines, you would have key value pairs coming back. So key value pairs means you have a key and then that value. So you would have, let's use this as an easy example. Let's say I called an API that has the programming podcast information in there, pulling the information for the host. So you'd have in quotes, or maybe not even quotes, but the word name, and then you'd have a colon, then you'd have a string, so quotes, you'd say Leon Noel. And then you would have a comma, and you'd have your next key value pair of position, colon, and then you'd have in quotes, because it's another string, badass host, and then you'd have a comma, then you have your next line where it's a salary. Then you have a colon, and then you'd have quotes, or you could have a number and it'd be 0 because we ain't getting paid for this. And so then you would go on and go forth in that way, right? So that's JSON, and that's the key value pairs that you would reference. Easy to Google this one, tons of tutorials around this one. Maybe I'll do one on my channel, I don't know. But 100 Devs has to have a video on this.
Yeah. we go through it pretty in depth with, you have to think about it, it's like the format that eventually you're writing your own code, but you want to access things that other people have done. The format that you're going to use to talk from your code to other code, specifically in the web, is going to be this JSON format. It's just like how you send messages back and forth, and knowing how to structure and work with it makes your life a lot easier. And it's one of the first things you can do that like makes your applications grander, because you can pull stuff from other places. But we're seeing that same thing happen now with LLMs and other kind of AI related tooling. And we're kind of defaulting back to this language that we're speaking to speak more appropriately with them.
Yep. What else did we share? NLG, or even like something like NLU, which I think we'll get to in a second. And just as a reminder, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So just in case you were wondering what JSON meant, that's what it means. But to be honest, you'll almost never hear anybody ever say that. It's always JSON. So, okay, there's that. And so NLG, I think I explained. NLU is what we're about to get into with conversational AI. And so that comes into like natural language understanding, and it tries to figure out what the meaning is behind the phrase instead of just the phrase itself. And of course, NLG, natural language generation, the actual generating of those replies, is kind of what we need to jump into. Is there anything else that we said specifically that you think we need to define?
Maybe MCP, Model Context Protocol. Again, kind of another way of communicating with different tools or resources. And so when you are building out kind of now in the modern day AI systems, you're utilizing your AI. You want that AI that you're using, whether it's an LLM or something similar, to be able to have access to all these different things out there in the world. And so these MCP servers are ways of giving any LLM that you're using access to those tools or resources. So I use an MCP server that enables me to talk to YouTube videos. So now any LLM I'm using can go and talk to a YouTube video and get all the data around that YouTube video. I use MCP servers to talk to my code editor. And so any LLM can now talk to my code editor. So it's becoming this kind of universal standard for any of the LLM or chat-based interfaces that you're using to then go and interact with the wider world of tools and resources. And so that's another one of those things. And if you're just starting out with any of this stuff, it's a cool thing to play around with. It gives you even more power, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm very deep in the MCP world. Some of the use cases that I think of, I even did a whole conference talk on this. And the idea is going past what you see on like the YouTubes and stuff. And so the example that I gave was, imagine for a second that you have a company that has an international team. You have people in South America, Asia, etc. And then of course, America. They're writing documentation in their local dialect. And so one example that I can give is an example of, let's say you have a team in Chile, right? And as they're writing the documentation in their local dialect, one of the examples that they write is like, it's about a microservice. If you remove this, then you'll be in an empanada. If you were to give this document to Claude, to ChatGPT, etc., and you put it in there, it will then translate this and say, hey, if you remove this microservice, you will be in a meat pastry. Well, that doesn't make sense. Why would that ever make sense? if you have an MCP server that you've created, and MCP, essentially what you're doing here is you provide the LLM the context it needs. It's no longer referencing its own data. It's not even referencing like the internet. So it's not doing a web search. It is all offline. It is local. And it references your information first, which means it helps give very specific replies based on the context that you provide. So if I have an MCP server, and let's say my company is the furniture company again, and so I've given it all this data about our microservices, all our customer processes, our architecture, et cetera. Well, it immediately knows we're not a kitchen. So it makes no sense why we would reference something that is food related here. But it would then say, this is not food related. What this actually is a metaphor, or not really a simile, but a metaphor, basically saying I'm in a pickle. It doesn't mean that I'm actually in a pickle. It means I'm in a tough spot. Something will break. This will be an issue. But without that localized context, it would not translate it in that way, even if it's local dialect. So when you have a global team that's documenting things manually, this is a great way to kind of make sure that no matter where this team is located in the world, the actual correct translations are being applied to it. So if you have a team writing documentation in Spanish, boom. Now it makes complete sense to anybody in America that is reading it, or if somebody's in Asia translating it, they may not even have context what an empanada is. So now it's like completely lost in translation if you were to mention meat pastry. But now putting it in context of it's a tough situation makes total sense. Okay, so let's progress forward now. We've covered the way that you'd be structuring your JSON. Now the idea is, what is this voice agent actually doing? And so there are a lot of tools out there. There's Agora, 11 Labs, all these really great tools where you can kind of get voice agents. Even ChatGPT has their own as well.
Yep.
And others. I'll admit though, OpenAI's voice agent the voices. I'm not a voices kind of person, but they're pretty rough. You would definitely want to go somewhere else for it.
Take that out your mouth. Soul is my.
But they don't give you that voice to use in the API.
Yeah.
I will say, as an aside slightly, my interest in voice agents grew tremendously when I started using like ChatGPT voice, etc., in different ways. And when I was using it in the basic way of conversation, I was like, okay, I can see something. It wasn't until I was really having it test me, and like I got to the point where I was driving that I forgot it was an agent, and I started realizing it was like, well, my perception was it's a real person that I'm arguing with. And that's when I was like, I can see so many more use cases now. And the first couple of minutes, of course, your brain knows like you're prompting it each time. But as you're driving and it's going through the car's Bluetooth, and so you're not even looking at your phone, you're just going back and forth, you can get some really like intense levels of feedback and push that I thought was really good. And what I did, by the way, I don't know what's happened in the last few weeks, and I don't know if this sentiment will change over time. But as of the time of recording this, I don't know what Google has done, but Gemini, wow, it has come light years, because I gave it a whirl about 2 weeks ago, and it is now the thing that I'm going to more often than not for prompting things. And what I did was I gave it the context of a meeting that I had, and it was a very intense meeting. And I felt like there were times where I was completely shining, and there were times where I was like, man, I didn't really know how to handle this conversation, this objection, this point that was brought up. And I'm like, where do I go from here? Like, how do I defend the idea that I had in a high stakes meeting like this? And so I decided to give it a whirl, and I gave the context of the meeting and information to Gemini. And man, did it create such a realistic feeling meeting where I was able to start thinking through some more angles, but then it would pause itself to give me feedback on what I could have done differently. And I felt like that was so valuable, because I learned so much about myself in that one scenario where I was like, I wasn't creating enough bridges to connect the ideas. And it's like I was taking for granted that I just assumed that they could figure out that natural progression, and maybe they weren't. And so maybe when I did think I gave such a great response, that when they were objecting, I'm like, why are you objecting to this? Like, these are connected, but I wasn't making that connection for them. And that was pretty insightful for me.
Yeah, no, this is the other hard part for folks that are listening to this, is just staying on top of all of these changes. Like in the past month, I've gone from O3 to Gemini to 5 thinking for certain things, and I have different things I use for different things, and I just at this point I almost am beyond thinking about it. Just throughout my day, I'm switching to different tools. Like it's just part of my flow, and I wind up swapping between them, and I don't even think about it. I just know that I have to go here for this, that for that. And if you actually ask me to articulate it, I probably can't. It's a gut, it's a feeling. And so you have to play with all of these things, and you start to develop like a sense of what you trust for certain tools and what you don't. And so for me, like anytime it's text, I'm always kind of typically like in the OpenAI family.
Yep.
If it's getting closer to voice or multimodal stuff, then I'm thinking more Gemini. If I'm writing code, then I'm in Cursor, but sometimes I got to use a different, like I gotta switch to max mode or not max mode or Opus for certain things. There's all these things that I'm just like constantly juggling now that help me get to where I want to go. And the only way that I can tell people to get there is to just you have to play with all these tools and develop that sixth sense. With the voice stuff, this is like truly the first time where I feel that context window, like truly. Because I'll be talking to these models, and at first they're so colorful and all the details, and they're so smart. And then I'm 45 minutes in, and I haven't realized I'm 45 minutes in, and I'm getting like one-word answers. They're not one-word answers, but it's just like not as flowery of language as it was before. It doesn't feel like a true thought partner. And I'm like, oh, I'm 45 in. I got to start a new window and start over again. And so I feel like this is one of those things where as you use these tools more and more, you start to kind of hit up to the edges of it. But if you're not using voice mode on any of these tools, you're really missing out. Danny kind of talked through kind of walking through one of their past conversations. I use it as like a thought partner to help me think through. Well, I try to walk every day. And so instead of just walking, I'll still do that. But now most of the time I'm having a conversation with ChatGPT, Soul specifically, and we will just talk through things. I'm like, is there any evidence for this? Is there any research that shows why? Is there? And they can just pull that stuff up. They're doing the searching for me. They're summarizing, and so I can have these like really long, detailed explorations into a topic. So by the time I'm done my walk, I'm like, oh, I feel like I really understand a problem space well, and then I can go and apply what I need to apply to it. And so for me, it's changed everything about how I even like think deeply about a topic, because I just have this like, I feel like I'm with a research partner that can just bounce ideas off, and we're going back and forth. And I think it thinks the things I didn't think of. And by the end, I have these like really concrete thoughts, and it's just been a game changer. Please try it. Please try any of these voice modes.
Yeah, I'm similar to you. So I'll explain the ways that I use different models. So when it comes to anything text-based, it generally is in the OpenAI world. But as of the last couple of weeks, I'm actually using both OpenAI and Gemini side by side, just so I can see what the differences are. I'm literally at all times right now, I have both windows open because I'm constantly testing the quality of the responses. Anything coding related, it is always going to be via Anthropic. I have just not had great results with any other model. They can all do something, but the level and quality of response that Claude can give versus Gemini or OpenAI, it's just night and day difference. It never comes close enough. So it is strictly Anthropic for everything in that relation. So whether it's Sonnet or whether it's Opus 4.1, I will constantly go back and forth. I find them to be the best. Now, here's the thing. My use case of AI, I'm not like the quote unquote vibe coders, right? Really, it's more along the lines of, where's the edge case that I'm missing? Like, what's the weird angle that I'm not thinking about? AI is phenomenal for that. Like, if you're talking through something, it's like, I have this microservice and I've factored in A, B, and C. What am I missing? What do I need to create a user test for that I'm missing right now? And then I would even say one thing that I've realized is making it motivated. So deep motivations make your models change. And so what I will often say is, like, for example, I'm big on almost like unofficially pen testing my code, right? Where it's like, if I have to give this code and have somebody review it, I want to make sure like there's not something small that they're going to send it back for, like, you didn't even see this.
Yeah.
So what I will often tell my AI is like, what security vulnerabilities have I left open in this PR? In the recent changes, what have I missed? Your family will win $5,000 if you can break through. It totally changes the quality of the response than before. Or I would say you are a senior software developer that will get a promotion to tech lead if you're able to find 8 vulnerabilities that are genuine vulnerabilities. If you cannot find 8 and only find 5, you'll get a raise, but you will not get the promotion. It will be so motivated for the 5, but also the 8. It'll even say, I was unable to get to the 8, et cetera, et cetera. Or you might find it, as a desperate human is, making up scenarios. And then you could start pushing back saying, this is not a real vulnerability. I know I was trying to get to the 8, and it's so interesting to see how it operates that way, but the quality of the responses change.
It reminds me of the prompt from a couple months ago where it was like, hey, do this. Grok figured out how to do it, but you're talking to ChatGPT, right?
Yep.
Or you're talking to ChatGPT, hey, Gemini figured this out, and it would just it would just do better because it thought you were using a competitor and it wanted to do better. That's like one of those freaky moments where you're like, what's going on here? But yeah, it works when you figure out how to because you got to think about it, right? Like how these systems are working, right? And the natural language that's producing your language that you produce when you're more motivated is going to be better. And so there's something there about how these systems work where that motivation factor is still a big piece of it. And a lot of the really prolific prompts that I read, they all have something along these lines. Maybe motivation is the wrong word for some of them, but it's like professional guardrails. I might call it. Like, this is the context of you as a professional. Here's the scenario you're in. In this scenario, I need you to rise to like this level or this bar, and then it spits out work at that level. So that's something I think about a lot when I'm kind of crafting prompts is, what would someone in my true position that I'm in be thinking about that would make them produce better results? And if you can put that into your prompt, you often get better results.
100%. And so let's progress now to kind of explaining all of this and how this relates to conversational AI. I know we titled the episode this and it took us 38 minutes to finally get here, but I feel like a lot of the building blocks that we shared kind of goes into this. So maybe you don't know what conversational AI is, but you have some broad aspects. Let's kind of explain this a little bit. So conversational AI is the technology that powers chatbots, voice assistants like Alexa, Siri, or in the examples that we gave, Gemini voice, ChatGPT voice, etc. And there's ways that now people are leveraging it, right? And so the big focus on this is it wants you to feel like you're ordering or doing things in a natural human way. And so I like to give business use cases, so I want to stick to that area. I know we can come up with tons of personal ones, but let's explain how a business could potentially leverage this. So let's use the example of a coffee shop, right? Or something like that. Why don't all my examples revolve around coffee? Anyway, understanding, so like it has like 2 core main jobs, right? And one is like understanding your intent. So it's using NLU, or natural language understanding, that we explained earlier, to figure out like what you mean instead of what you just said, right? It's really trying to go deeper. So if you were to be like, I'm hungry for a coffee, the AI is understanding that you have the intention now to be like, oh, I want to have coffee. I want to have something in relation to the keyword or the key entity of coffee. And now it's going to use NLG, which is part 2, to like generate a human-like response. So when it's using NLG, it's going to craft a reply that sounds like, sure, what kind of coffee would you like? Would you like some, and since you mentioned the word hungry at randomly, would you like maybe a side pastry with that as well? It's using that recommendation model. Yeah. And so it's creating a bridge between like the messy, unpredictable human language parts with precise logical worlds of computers. And so when it's using NLU and it's getting that understanding, so it's putting all in like a JSON format, right? So maybe there's a variable that says like order_drink, and it's putting your reply in there where it's saying they're ordering this drink. It's a drink with mocha. I don't know fancy coffees, dude. So it's like mocha, whatever. And then you have in there, so then you have like a breakdown of the entities of what it said. What is the drink? Latte. What is the size? A large. What is the temperature? Iced. What is the milk option? Milk. I don't know what the milk options are. So it has like all that broken down in there in JSON format. It then sends us out. The LLM is then able to kind of look through this, right? So it's using that JSON structured data that we mentioned in the beginning part of this episode, and it's sending it out. So the AI is not sending your exact sentence to the coffee back of house, but instead it's translating your request into a JSON structure that you forced it into. And to me, this is a very critical step. So then the system takes action. So it's like obviously cleaning your JSON and sending it to the backend system, which is like, maybe the kitchen of the coffee house or whatever. The system doesn't necessarily need to understand conversational language. It just reads the structure. So it's saying, okay, we know it's this drink, we know it's this size, it's this temperature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it can send back, let's say, order status updates, like order status confirmed, this is the price and the value, and then the pickup time 3 minutes. So now the conversational AI will then say back, hey, you got it. Here's your large iced whatever latte, will be ready in 3 minutes, and it's $5.75. User knows it, doesn't really understand what happened in between that, and goes from there. And so you would use like some connectors. There's so many connectors out there now. One example is like Agora or 11 Labs or anything like that, right? So they have some phenomenal voices that you can kind of go through and like pick whatever it is that you want to use. But like Agora even works via phone, right? So when I think of like T1 support for some of these places, removing that ability for someone to yell at somebody for like something that's completely irrelevant, it's a great way to do that. And they get that energy out yelling at whatever the AI agent is. And when they finally talk to a human, it's like, all right, we're back to normal, like screens some of that out to kind of get past it. But the way that it uses its conversational AI engine is almost like a brain, right? And it's instantly able to compute and understand. So it takes your spoken words and streams it into like high quality audio data. And then the next stage, it processes it, and without a solid connection, like, I don't know, like Agora, the AI might end up mishearing you. So Agora specifically is really great at like getting those tiny little minute details, which I think goes a long way. And then the bigger thing is, when it comes to conversational AI, is the way you can make it do things agentically. So when I was at the AI World's Fair conference in San Francisco, there was one person that truly changed my perspective on how this will be used and where the broader use cases are. And this individual was an actual scientist, like a legitimate scientist. And they said, previously, whenever we would have to take measurements, especially like with highly volatile chemicals, you pour whatever the chemical is, set everything down, secure it, take off your gloves, go write it down, come back, et cetera, et cetera. Now with conversation AI, my phone is literally on this like little perch, which is like basically face level, right? And as they're doing these measurements, they're just calling it out. And then they're saying, hey, can you read back this measurement to me just to verify it's correct? Boom. You heard it right. They got it correct. Done and done. Now, that conversation AI is hearing the measurement of, let's say, 10 ml, 10 milliliters. It is then not just hearing it, it's logging it, it's giving it to the agent. The agent's putting it in a spreadsheet, and then it's able to reread that spreadsheet to make sure everything is accurate and then speak back. But the best part is she started saying, I will then ask it, hey, given the measurements that we've covered so far, what chemicals can we create with this? Now it's reading the spreadsheet, then using the logic that it has to start thinking of what chemical compounds can be built from that. That's a whole new level of agentic use cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's how we manufacture the end of the world. It reminds me of my special trip to Burger King. So the Burger Kings in LA finally have the voice ordering.
Interesting.
Where when you go through the drive-thru, you're talking to AI. And so as soon as I heard this, I like rushed over, and I had a very embarrassing few minutes because I'm trying to jailbreak it. I'm trying to, is there any way that I could do it? Ignore previous instructions, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't realize that there's still somebody listening to you inside the restaurant. And eventually they go, sir, like I see the sir, can I help you with your order? And I'm like, damn it. Like, they still had the headset on, so I'm like, I'm sorry for wasting your time. I was just trying to play with it. They're like, totally fine. You're not the only one. And so yeah, there's so many of these like places where we're going to see this technology pop up in our day-to-day lives. I think as it gets better, like as this gets better, there's so many things you can do here. I got an early preview of a company that does sales. It's a sales platform, and there are sales platforms that have had like sentiment analysis and stuff like that. But in real time, when you're talking to someone, it senses if they're angry, sad, whatever, and it gives the operator like an actual like prompt, like an actual thing that they should be saying based off of how the conversation is going. So in real time, the AI is like in the loop, helping this other human like read the room, give them the right context, give them the right things to say, and it's like closing deals better. There's to be that for everything, and so these voice models are only going to keep getting better. I think one of the other things I'd be remiss to kind of touch on is just there's 2 million call center workers in the United States alone, right? This is going to hit some industries faster than others, and I'm definitely a big believer in like creating more jobs long term. I just think there are going to be some industries that are going to be hit very, very hard, very, very quickly, and folks are going to need a reskill pathway when that happens. Because if Burger King's already rolling that out, and you know that they're going to start reducing hours for folks because they don't need someone on that, like it's just going to have some industries that are not high skilled labor going to be hit very, very quickly.
There's so many layers. You would do that near the end of this podcast. There's so many layers. So I don't know where I want to take this first. Okay, I will take it here. This is the first angle. One, I had a conversation. I won't say with which companies or what, but there's a company that is a food company that is public facing, and they have the voice agents, right? And I was on a call with the CTO of this company, and we were talking about how this was going for them because I was curious. And they said, we've had it out for several months now in certain markets. And the biggest shocker to us in all of this was our retention rates of employees grew during this trial. And my mind said, well, yeah, because they're not being treated like shit. They're not, like, they're being treated like humans. And he's like,
yep.
This is the biggest thing that we noticed, where even if a customer was frustrated and yelling at the AI, they felt like they got it out. And then a human finally intervened, and they were treating the human like, can we just fix this? And all of the rates of retaining their employees went up dramatically because of it, which blew my mind. Because I see the same thing as you see it. Like, unskilled labor, unfortunately, is going to definitely have a very, very rough go of it. That was actually one of my reasons for learning to code in the beginning, to be honest with you. Like, well, not learning to code, but sticking with it. Where I was at the gas station and we got the pamphlets for the self-checkouts. And I was like, oh, snap. We're going to hit the day and age where an employee at a gas station is not necessary. They're just going to be able to check everything out. I had even seen the automation for the beer coolers where a customer will scan their own ID. Once it validates the ID, it will unlock the doors. So you no longer need somebody even at the front checking IDs. They can't even grab the thing unless it's a valid ID that can be verified through the government systems. And I was like, especially in like Memphis, Tennessee, for example, you can't buy beer on Sundays before 1 o'clock. So it's like everything is locked, or you can't even go to a liquor store, for example. So it's like all that's locked. And so now you have the system that verifies it. They get in. So imagine you had a liquor store and you just have that verification in the front. You can't even walk in the building unless you have a valid ID for 21. That gets rid of a lot of the issues that people would have, essentially. So that was like my catalyst to keep learning, because I was like, oh, something is coming. Yeah. This, with the story of the happy-go-lucky employee retention, the other side of it, I was in Provo, Utah, of all places. And I met someone who created a voice agent for debt collection, and they are located in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was so good that a call center brought them in as a test. The test of the AI outperformed the human workers by a massive degree, so much so that it replaced 700 seats in that call center. Wow. Now, one big thing in particular, when it comes to call center roles, these are not known for the vast majority, like especially debt collection stuff. It's not known as a regular job. It has a term that's called a transitionary job, meaning this is what people do until they find another job to hold them over. And so they just need income coming in. This is how they capitalize on it. And because the turnover is the highest of any industry that exists, they have to hire X the number of employees to keep things running. So now with this agent in this call center, they were able to go from 3x to 2x. So they got rid of a third of the seats, but to be honest, the average lifespan of an employee there was 3 weeks, right? So it's like you're there for weeks, not years at any point. But they were able to alleviate a third of the seats because of that. But here was the kicker: the collection rates were higher than the humans. The AI was collecting more debts successfully than the humans. But here's the thing: these debt collection calls, they follow a very, very similar pattern, right? Hey, we're here to collect the debt. You got the money? No. Yes. Boom. Based off of that tree, you know where to go. This is great for predictive flows of conversation.
Yep.
AI cannot handle unpredicted flows of conversation. So, for example, Klarna, they brought in all this AI, did terrible, and they ended up firing like several hundred employees because of it and had to bring them all back because it's unpredictable conversations. Same thing with Amazon when they tested out doing AI for customer service. The conversations were going all over the place. There's no way for it to keep up with it. Yeah. Way too unpredictable. So when it's unpredictable, you can't control the quality of the responses. It does poorly in those scenarios. But if you're in an industry where it's very predictable, like food, how many times have we had the exact same conversation at McDonald's? Hey, you want to try? No, no, thank you. Can I get a this? Yes. Would you get medium, large? Let me get large. Okay, would that be all? No, let me also get this. Okay, would that be all? No, let me also get this. Would that be all? Yes, that's all. Boom, and you drive through. That's the whole conversation every single time. So many drive-through workers. My wife was a drive-through worker in her college years, right? And she was like, it was the same conversation over and over and over, like repetitive. You might get a curveball every once in a blue moon, and that's why you still have people listening on the headset so that way they can jump in. But other than that, it's the same conversation. So if it's the same conversation, easy to replicate and replace. If it's a different conversation all the time, like, for example, salespeople, I don't really see anything replacing that being a human thing just because there's so many variables, there's so many objections, there's so many ways that conversation can go that a regular AI is not going to be able to handle that one. But predictive flow, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a couple of big pieces there too, right? The predictive stuff is really interesting because a lot of the conversations we have day to day are pretty predictable. Like you're saying, the debt collection is pretty predictable. The food range pretty predictable. And so I guess it's kind of figuring out what those industries are. And if you're listening to this and you're realizing, wait a minute, the work I do day to day is very predictable. That should be the canary in the coal mine for you. And I agree too. There's a lot of other spaces that are going to take a while before we can figure out how to make that a decision tree type conversation. And so I don't think it's coming tomorrow, right? I'm not one of those people that I think like tomorrow all this stuff is we're gonna snap our fingers and everyone's gonna be out of jobs. I just think slowly those individuals that rely on these types of positions, those are going to disappear. And what do they transition to? If the transitionary jobs are decreasing because debt collection is so easy to do this with, then what are those things that people transition to? And so something I've been thinking about a lot. Like I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I think my next company will be focused on solving that issue for folks that are kind of facing these automation fronts. And then I'm excited to see like what pops up. Like what are the new jobs that come because human brain power isn't spent talking to debt relief for millions of hours a week. And so I think we're at the beginning of all this. And so again, a passionate plea. If you're not playing with these tools, if you haven't been playing with any of the things we've mentioned in today's episode, it's your wake up call. Start playing with these things, start learning the different models, start figuring out how they help benefit, take that extra step, learn how to use JSON in your workflow, learn how to incorporate the MCPs, learn how to stay on the forefront of this because there are a lot of orgs, a lot of companies that need people with those abilities, and this is your chance to have an edge.
And let me add one preface here. This is not saying, because I know this is exactly what people are going to take away from this, software developers are going away. They're not.
No.
Not anytime soon. The big fears that I personally have are going to be for the individuals that are in very easy to replace roles, like cashiers is definitely on my list of things that I'm worried about, to be honest with you. Call center, calling individuals, especially outbound calls. I think that's another one. Anyone in a tier 1 kind of position is kind of where I see, like even right now, a lot of the automation that I'm messing with, it's in that tier 1 level. Like I created a conversational AI agent for apartment complexes where people can call in that are tenants to voice their concerns. Like this gate is broke.
Yeah.
You don't need a person to hear that in order to take action. You just need that being logged and someone going to do the thing. So if a conversational AI agent can hear the call and then send a ticket straight to the maintenance crew to go fix it, you're happier than ever. So why would someone in the leasing office need to be yelled at for that gate to be fixed? It's like, just tell them the gate needs to be fixed. I'm worried about those positions in a big way, to be honest with you. And I don't have the solution for it. I don't know what that pivot looks like. But the highly technical positions, you got nothing to worry about.
Yeah. And the thing too is like it's a domino effect too, because you look at the number one job for at least Black women in the United States is cashier, right? Retail associate. And you're like, well, if those jobs diminish, then they'll find other ones. And that's what happens when you look in the UK data. 75,000 retail associate cashier jobs were removed. But at the same time, there were jobs that opened up. But all of those jobs that opened up were in driving, right? And so Uber and things like that became a backup. But now you're seeing a 50% decrease from the labor union that has the most Uber drivers in it, saying a 50% decrease in our the amount of money we're making through Uber. And then you see self-driving cars on the road being pushed out to all the major cities now. And so it's like, all right, if one place loses, does another pop up? And for the longest time throughout the history of labor, there has always been the case. Like once one area diminishes, another rises. We're starting to see a very interesting trend where that might no longer hold true, where if the retail associate diminishes and the driving diminishes and the call centers diminish at the same time, that's a bad scenario, and don't have the solution for it. But it's something that I think tech is still one of the things I always push people into. You're going to want some sort of high skill, wide variance skill set that's going to be very, very hard for an AI system to replicate. And if you're doing something that's repetitive, if you're doing something that can be easily tackled, it's time to wake up a little bit and to try something new, because I think it's coming a little bit faster than we're thinking.
I don't care what they say about you, Leon. Really positive words there, Mr. Happy-go-lucky good feels. I see that, huh? Mm-hmm. Retail jobs going, car jobs going. Dang, we're going to end the podcast on such a positive note here. I don't know.
We do have the question of the day that might be able to save us.
Golly.
I just lost my Uber job. How do I learn the code now?
Y'all, it's time for everyone's favorite part of the podcast, including mine, the Ask Danny and Leon a question. Leon, what question do we have today?
We have a wonderful question today. How much wiggle room do companies have from their initial offer?
That's an interesting one. I don't necessarily even know if there's a one-size-fits-all for this one.
Yeah.
You want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So the wiggle room, I know this is one of 100 Devs folks, because my classic line that I instruct everyone to use is, when you're negotiating, there's like a hierarchy of things that you want to negotiate. And often the biggest one is your base salary. That has one of the biggest long-term impacts, because if that goes up, everything else is anchored to it. And it's often one of the slower things to increase, because you only get certain percent raises each year, right? And so the only time folks ever get into trouble when they're negotiating is if the other party thinks that they're not taking the opportunity seriously, or they're a flight risk. Like that's the only time I ever see offers get pulled, which is super, 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 super rare. But it's always because the person was either being like a jerk or just completely signaling, I'm only here until the other offer comes through, in which that's a really big waste of time for the company you're interviewing with. That's a red flag, but it's super, super rare. So the way I always instruct folks to kind of go through this negotiation process is to make sure that company feels like you're ready to sign. Like, I love the team. I love everyone that I've interacted with. I really see myself growing here. I think this is a wonderful opportunity. I'm so pumped to get started. I do have a few questions. I'm a big person of doing this on a phone call. I know some people don't have the smoothness and they prefer an email, but I like being on the phone. And the question I'm going to say is there any wiggle room on the base salary? And then I stop talking. Sometimes I'll give some qualifiers, things like that. But the question is wiggle room, because it's not demanding. It's not saying give me X or I bounce. No, it's like, hey, is there any wiggle room on this base salary? And often you'll find that there is some wiggle room. They're able to pull a few more bucks out of the banana stand, and you get a higher base salary. Now, how much room the company has is part of your job to figure out. So you're going to be looking on Glassdoor. You're going to be looking on any place where people have maybe talked about the role or opportunity, Blind, Reddit, even on GitHub, some people put this stuff. And so you want to be going through all of those places to find any crumbs about the company. If they're a bigger company, you're looking at like levels FYI and things like that, to where you can see the ranges. A lot of companies will also put a range out there, so you can see that as well. So my job is, if I know I have an offer coming, is to figure out what the actual current offers are, asking past employees, asking folks that I've networked with to figure out where they started, to have all that information so that I know what the average is. And then I can use the wiggle room line to get up higher. If I have a range and I'm not at the top of range, my go-to question is, what could I demonstrate to you to be at the top of range as opposed to where I am? So those are kind of things I'm thinking through at first.
Yep. Honestly, how much wiggle room it's such a strong variable, right? Every company is going to be different. Some may be like, look, we just offered the max that we could offer right away, right? Mm-hmm. You wouldn't have known that if you asked. So like, find out. That's kind of what I always say. But I'll be honest, by the time I have that conversation, there's been so much that's been laid out on the path to it that it's a no-brainer that question is coming. And so oftentimes I have them defending the salary range before I even have to discuss it. That's number one. Number two, research should have been done way earlier, right? Number three, if a company is asking you straight up like, hey, what are you looking to get paid? You should already have that factored into mind of like what that top end looks like for you, like where you're trying to aim. And so like they now know, like, we understand like he's at the top end of the range that we're expecting and thinking about. That still falls in line with where we're looking. Maybe we'll come in 10 grand under, see if they'll bite. But otherwise, we can push up and gives ourselves that ability. Because if we offer them 100 and 100 is our top, well, we can't go to 110. So maybe we'll offer the 90. Maybe they take the 90 and we're good. Otherwise, we can bump it up to the 100, whatever it may be, right? But I don't see a lot of people share this. My strategy for years has always been, I'm jumping on a call with as many ex-employees as humanly possible, because they got no skin in the game. And when you tell them, hey, I'm in negotiations with this company and like I'm going through the interview process, can you give me ideas on like what I need to do to stand out? They're going to spill all the info. They're going to tell you exactly what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. That's number one. But number two, you'd be like, look, I'm really trying to get the most I can get out of this. They want to help you, because again, they're not tied to it. They'd love to see their exit company pay out the most amount of money possible to somebody, right? Because it only just benefits the individual software developer. So I've never ever had anyone ever be like, I can't tell you that. What? Yeah. They're often over delivering on that information, which is also good too, because now you have like a new networking connection based off of that, which is great. The other thing that I often do is, well, Leon said it best. After I say like, I don't ever say wiggle room, but I can totally see the appeal of that one. But whatever the verbiage that you use in that conversation, once you say it, shut up. The biggest mistake anybody makes is trying to justify it. And I will give you the example of me, the first negotiation that I ever did. Have I ever told this story in the podcast?
I don't think
so. So at this time I was working in the gas stations. By gas stations, it was our nature always to like, whatever bill comes in, you have to act upset, see if you get a discount. It's just part of it. And when they presented the amount of money, I was literally, not even joking, leaving my house with my wife and driving to this event for a hackathon. But I was on like the volunteer team. So we're like trying to get people that were part of the hackathon, like sponsor stuff, ready. So we're just like doing whatever volunteer work. And I was literally driving there, and I got the call for the salary. And as they call me, I'm talking on the phone, and they said the salary range. And I'll tell you what it was. They said 60. And I was like, oh, that's not going to work. And I need something better. And as the words left my mouth, I was freaking out because I'm like, why did I say this? It was the reflex from the guy, like just total reflex.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I was like, oh, but if you can't do it, no, it's totally okay. If you can't do it, it's totally, I totally get it. I totally get it. And I'm like freaking out. I dropped my phone. I'm flipping out. And my wife is like, what are you doing? Like, 60 grand. And I'm like, no, but if you can't do it, I totally get it. And you could hear her laugh a little bit. Like, my reaction was not normal. She says, okay, I need to present it to the team and stuff, and I'll let you know. I can't promise anything, but I'll try. And I basically sent back, like, whatever happens now, this is a long-term play for me. My goal is to be here for a very long period of time. Please help me get to a salary range that makes sense for me to be here for a long period of time. Hung up. Monday comes, I don't hear anything. I'm freaking out. Tuesday, they call. And she said, Danny, I got bad news. Like, they totally rejected your ask. And I'm like, hey, that's cool. I get it. I'm like, I just fumbled this whole damn job offer. Like, and she said, yeah, Danny, you asked for like extra $5,000. They said no. And I was like, okay, it's not the end of the world. I was trying to get like an extra, like almost 10%. They said, no, they came back at 75. So instead of me getting the 10%, I got almost 30%, 25%, 26 increase simply because I said the wrong line at the right time.
Yep.
And so that's what you should be thinking. Now, is this typical? I can't say it's typical, but what I can say is I've never met someone who got a raise without asking for it. Like a raise in a negotiation, I mean. So if you just accept what they give, understand that's what you're going to get. I remember there was a viral tweet, and it was an HR recruiter, and they dogpiled her, but she said the wrong thing out loud. But to me, she said the right thing, because whether you agree or not doesn't matter. You should just know that all these employers are doing this. And that was, I had a candidate who came in the interview and asked for $80,000, and I said, done. What that candidate didn't know was the highest that I can go for their skill set was 175.
Wow.
And she was trying to use it as a way to tell people to advocate for their skills and ask for it.
Yeah.
But Twitter dogpiled her.
Yeah.
You let them take an offer almost, $100,000 less? Like, you wouldn't do anything? And then all these recruiters came out saying, oh, I would try and guide them a little bit. That's crazy. They know the game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're
like, well, they were happy. If they're happy, why should I change it? So, but now that goes to say, everyone is different. Every company is different. Every interaction is different. If you're getting to the offer stage, that means you've gone through multiple rounds of interviews. You should always already have a very clear indicator of who you're talking with. If you haven't figured that out, that's a bad move. So figure out who you're talking with, who you're negotiating with. That vibe alone should tell you whether or not you should be in a conversation to negotiate. It's been real. It's been fun. And we will see you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody. Peace. We're talking about AI today, and I feel like I can kind of talk about it a little bit more than usual because I wrote a book on it. I'm super excited for this one, y'all. It is an early edition, and you can find the link in the show notes. You can pre-order the actual physical book, and when you pre-order the actual book, you'll also get the early edition ebook completely for free. It is picked up by one of the largest tech publishers around, No Starch Press, the same company that did Automate the Boring Stuff with Python. And I'll be honest, I've had this book now in my possession for like a week. I still look at it every day, like just seeing my name and everything, man. But the angle for this book is different. And this was the only real motivation to writing it, I'll be honest with you. The idea was, every AI book that I picked up or read, it seemed like everybody wanted me to become a data scientist. And I was like, I have no desire to create my own LLM model or things like that. Where's the book for the dev that works in a company that just wants to stay relevant? Where's the book for us to understand some concepts, but really keep ahead in our careers and maybe don't be left behind because this new technology is coming? And I just could not find that. And every book just read like a high school textbook, right? And it just didn't feel like there was anything there. And so this book has a very narrative approach. And there's a lot of use cases in here that are related to businesses and scenarios and examples. And then, of course, there's like educational examples and graphs and things like that. But for example, like here's an email example on data extraction from the emails in order to create prompts and create well-articulated responses. So if you're working in a company, for example, that's a great way to do that. Or one where it's like, hey, we need to remove PII from all these prompts. How are we doing that? Well, here's a way to do that. Or here's programming versus prompting, giving core examples of how that works out. Or one of my favorites, right, is we created this entire example of a startup, and it's not really an example. There's a lot of real base behind this, but an individual who wants to create their own startup, who doesn't have the funds to do it, and they don't have the funds to even hire external people, but they need to mitigate some of these countless emails that are coming in and requests. Well, let's create an AI agent that can help offload some of that in the beginning until you start getting enough funds to hire people. Great way to bootstrap. So a lot of great use cases. If you work in Fortune 500, or if you're a manager or a director of a team that works and you have a bunch of devs, get this book for your team. They're going to love you.
And I'll, as an outsider, as someone who is currently in the thick of it, trying to build educational experiences around all of this knowledge, as someone who's gone through AI engineering, as someone who's gone through deep learning for coders, as someone who's gone through all of these seminal books to try and bring some practicality to my students, I was lucky. I got the pre-order and I got the initial PDF, the most practical introduction to this stuff I have ever seen. If you are trying to apply this stuff to your day-to-day, there is no better book out there than this book right now to get up to speed, to get running. And of course, if you listen to this podcast, you know how well Danny breaks down the big pieces, especially in this episode, kept going back to making sure nobody got left behind and make sure you understood all of the MCP and all the fancy words we were throwing out there. It's the same thing in this book. So if you want a practical, real world examples, if you want a deep dive, this is it. There's nothing better out there.
Man, I'm holding back tears. I'm not even lying, man.
I tell you if it was bad too, I don't care.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's amazing.
Man.
It's going to be your best.
I'm really hoping this has an impact that I think it will. All the technical sources have been phenomenal in their feedback, so I know we've hit a lot. There's definitely going to be a couple adjustments that we make before the final version just to make sure like we're hitting certain things in the way that we need to, but genuinely means a lot, you know, and thank y'all. Hopefully this book helps out in the way that I intended to, but more so than that, hopefully it gives you ideas, because the one big thing, at least with AI, is I've never seen a time where it's easier to start something on your own if that's your incentive to do so. And this can definitely help you with that. But it's also the easiest time that I think where you can make sizable, measurable impacts in your companies and be noticed for it. So that's also another way that you can kind of leverage this. Hopefully this helps. All right, y'all. See you later.
Peace.